Hello, everyone. Our discussion today is titled Leadership and Followership in Nigeria. And the major objective in this presentation is to discuss the concept of leadership and followership as it relates to the Nigerian state. How can we assess or appraise leadership in Nigeria? How can we appraise or assess followership in Nigeria? And how can we make these two, leadership and followership, a better experience, in the Nigerian state? That's the those are the things we're going to try to understand or discuss in this presentation. Now, the Nigerian state, gained independence in 1960, and of course, since then, there have been so many hopes, aspirations, and several people have also made some arguments or assessments about Nigeria, over the past 60 years that it has been in existence now. Some have argued that the state was not designed to cater for the welfare or the needs of the Nigerian people. All right. Others have argued that there are certain challenges in with leadership, with followership in Nigeria, which we're going to look at as we go along. It has also been argued that the ruling elite, those who are in power, the public officers, are fond or are always are very eager to use state resources for their private gain, and of course this leads to unnecessary competition for control over these resources because whoever is in charge, exploits these resources for their own private gain, and of course certain activities also seem to have been prevailing: thuggery, election rigging, arson, ethnicity, and these have not been restricted to the civilian regime. Even the military regimes, have also experienced these things. Of course, you don't have elections in the military regime, but the point is that these are some of the activities that have characterized the Nigerian state. You know, um, Again, it's important to mention that the military period of Nigerian rule have also had a toll, on the Nigerian state. And some have argued that followership, that followership in Nigeria has been opportunistic in the sense that followers, since they are not able to achieve their goals, their desires, since they're not able to live in a prosperous society, they have resorted to align or to forming an alliance basically with those who are in the ruling class, and so they have more or less resorted to seizing the opportunity, you know, and trying to get their own share of the national cake, as they always say, it. So this has led to that kind of mentality of if you can't beat them, join them, and so many followers, rather than behave in a way that depicts a Nigeria that is thriving or progressive, they would rather engage in activities that are self-seeking, self-serving, and selfish, to a very large extent. Now, what does leadership mean? Like many other social science concepts, leadership is a concept that doesn't have one definition. We have said over and again, rather, that social science concepts have multiple meanings, depending on the perspective of the person defining, depending on the experience, depending on how knowledgeable such a person is about such a concept. So definitions vary, but one thing that you see that cuts across most of the definitions of leadership are concepts of power and influence. Those are two concepts that cut across many of the definitions that you find of leadership. We have given two examples here just to buttress that point. There's a definition by Arnold who says that leadership is the exercise of power or influence in social collectivities, in groups, associations, communities, and so on and so forth. So the exercise of power and influence in these social groups, social associations, is what leadership is. There's another definition that leadership refers to exalted position that bestows on the occupant of that position power, influence, and resources, to organize and supervise the behavior of people within their jurisdiction. So a position that bestows on an individual who occupies such a position with power, influence, and resources. So you see again that power and influence is coming into play here. All right. But the question is, leadership does not exist in a vacuum. So for us, for you to have leadership, there has to be followership. And that takes us to the concept of followership. Followership, of course, is referred to as the majority of the other people who are affected by, directly or indirectly, or who are a party to the decisions and actions of the leaders. All right. So they're either affected by those actions or decisions, or they are party to these actions or decisions. And in some cases, it is both. They are both affected by, as well as a party to decisions of leadership. So followership are the rest of the other people who are affected by what the leadership does. All right. And of course, it has been said that leadership and followership are more like collaborators, because one does not exist without the other. In fact, Gibbs has said that there can be no leading without following, and vice versa. There can be no following without leading. So wherever you talk about leadership, followership is the other side of the same coin. All right. So followers are expected to mirror, to a very large extent or to some degree, the leadership. So when you look at the followers, you can imagine the kind of leadership that will exist in such a society, because it is from among the followers that leaders are selected. So the leadership or the followership mirrors what kind of leadership would be in place, and of course the leadership also reflects on what kind of followership is in place to some degree as well. Because they are they are they are mutually reinforcing, like we have said before. Okay. Even though, of course, the leadership or the followership more reflects leadership than leadership reflects full followership, because leadership, even though it comes out of followership, can change. The status, the position, changes individuals. But of course, the followership reflects what kind of leadership is in place. Because it is from among the followers that leaders are taking. I hope that point is clear. Now, we must emphasize that in order for good leadership, or true leadership to exist, there has to be the support, there has to be the goodwill, there has to be the respect of followership. So true leadership cannot exist without the respect and support of the followers, right? And that's a very important aspect for us to take note of. Now, what are the basic elements of the relationship between leaders and followers? What are the elements? What are the basic ingredients of that relationship between leaders and followers? There are 4 things that must be in place, for a successful relationship between leaders and followers. Number 1 is that there has to be a leader, somebody who has the power, who has the resources, who has the influence to manage the behavior of individuals. There have to also be followers, who are affected by the decisions, by the actions of the leadership. There has to be the situation, the context within which that relationship exists. So it can be within a state, it can be within a church setting, it can be within a school setting, it can be within an informal association. There has to be a situation, a context, for that relationship to exist. And that's what the situation means. And there also has to be the goals or the task that is intended to achieve or to be achieved in that relationship. So leadership has objectives, which they intend to achieve. And that objective is what brings leadership and followership together, in pursuit of that common interest or common objective or common goal, depending on the context or the situation within which that relationship exists. So we're saying that leadership-followership relationship or leader-follower relationship must contain these 4 elements: a leader, a follower, the context or situation, and of course the task or the goal, the objective that is intended to be achieved. All right. Now, there are so many types of leadership, but we're going to concentrate on these 3 types of political leadership. Number 1 is the tyrannical leadership, or the patriarchal leadership. All right. This kind of leadership results from love, reverence, or dependence of the follower on the leaders or on the leadership. So you find such a type of leadership among monarchs, in a monarchical system where you have a royal family, you have a kingly or a royal lineage, where the father is the king, and of course when the father dies, the son takes over. When the son dies, the grandson takes over. That kind of royal lineage, you know, you find out that the followers follow out of, or the followers are have an allegiance to leadership out of love for the royal family, out of reverence and respect for the royal family, out of a dependence on the royal family, for either protection or for certain resources. All right, so that is the patriarchal leadership, and it is common among monarchs basically. The second type is the tyrannical leadership. The tyrannical leadership is one where fear and coercion exists. So people are following because they are afraid of the consequence of not following, or because they are forced to follow. There's really no respect. There's really no allegiance. There's really no love for such a leadership. But you just follow because you are coerced into following, or you're afraid of the consequence of not following. That's the second type of leadership, and of course, this is more common under military regimes or dictatorial regimes. The last type, which of course is not the least, is the charismatic leadership. Here, followers follow out of love, still affection for leadership, you know, respect and recognition of the qualities, the distinctive qualities, maybe in the level of intelligence, the personality of the leader, you know, the oratory skills of the leader. These are some of the special qualities that make some leaders charismatic, and earn them the respect, the affection, the love of their followers. Now, one may wonder, how is charismatic leadership different from patriarchal leadership? In the patriarchal leadership, there's really in the charismatic leadership rather, there's really not the element of dependence. So people are respected and loved, you know, or the leadership are respected and loved in charismatic leadership because they have earned it. They have earned that respect. They have earned that love, because of certain qualities they have, of good leadership skill, of a very high level of intelligence in handling issues. They have earned that respect from the people. But in patriarchal leadership, it is the order that people have met, and so just because of the status quo, because it is a way of life. It has become a way of life, you know. So people are just naturally, um, respectful of the leadership, dependent on leadership, you know, and so it's not really earned like a charismatic leadership, like in charismatic leadership, respect, reverence, loyalty to leadership in the patriarchal leadership is not really earned. It's a form of the structure that is already in place. I hope that makes sense. So that you don't confuse the two, because of course the two of them, the people, the followers love, respect the leaders, but in the patriarchal leadership, the structure is already in place. So people just come and meet a structure already, a patriarchal structure in place, and they just have to love and respect such a leadership. Not necessarily because leadership has earned it, but because they have no other choice. All right. In the charismatic leadership, the leadership has earned the respect, the trust of the people, the loyalty of the people, and so they have such loyalty and respect from the followers. All right. So these are three types of political leadership. Of course, there are several other types which you can find in other literature, but these are the three we're going to talk about in this presentation. Now, what is the nature of leadership and followership in Nigeria? We have mentioned at the beginning of the lecture that there have been several arguments about how leadership in Nigeria and followership in Nigeria have fared over the years since independence. All right, we're going to continue that conversation here. Leadership has been characterized in Nigeria by self-maximizing, you know, self-interested, self self self-seeking, you know, self-seeking individuals. And so the idea is that those who have occupied leadership positions in Nigeria are people who are self-interested, who are self-seeking, who are self-maximizing, and so they seek to benefit themselves first before they think about the other person, which is not a very, very good assessment. All right, leadership positions are also gotten largely through election rigging, bribery, false promises, and so on and so forth, coups and counter coups, which are not very, very good assessments still, also. And of course, this has led to corruption, this has led to moral bankruptcy, this has led to leadership bankruptcy. And so there's a very high level of decadence in Nigeria. And regardless of the various efforts that have been done or made in trying to reduce or manage, limit the level of corruption, corruption still persists. There's the ICPC, there's the EFCC. All of these are agencies that have been set up by the government to try and limit or reduce the level of corruption in Nigeria. But of course, the question is, how successful have these organizations or agencies been? All right. It has also been argued that one major problem of leadership is mentoring. So leaders are not mentored. And so they just come into leadership and they are basically learning on the job. There has not been any prior mentorship, any prior training that they have received, that leaders have received, especially from previous past leaders about how to go about leadership. What are the intricacies of leadership, especially within the Nigerian states, which is the context that we're talking about here. So these are some of the assessments of scholars about leadership in Nigeria. Now, how about followership? We mentioned before that followership has become opportunistic. If you can't beat them, you join them. All right. Now, it has also been argued that followers have been exploited by leadership for several purposes. Followers are expected or are bribed to vote during elections. So when it's election time, those who go out to vote are those who have received certain kind of bribe or of inducement by the political class, either in cash or in kind. They have either received some bags of rice or some tubers of yam, or they have received some cash, and so that motivates them to go out and vote. Many young people who are followers, and even the elderly people who are followers also resort to voting because of these um, these things that they get from the politicians. And so those kind of followers will not expect anything less, will not expect anything more rather from the leadership, because the leadership has emerged out of deceit and corruption. The followers are also used in rigging elections, snatching of ballot boxes, tearing of ballot papers, killing of electoral officers. All of these are perpetrated by the followers. The leaders or the political elites do not carry out these activities themselves. They hire the followers and pay them some stipend to do these dirty jobs for them. Of course, that takes us to the next one. Followers are used in doing the dirty jobs of the leaders. Assassination of political enemies, political opponents, of the opposition, of certain other people, and of course carrying out certain other jobs that are not decent, that are not morally correct or right in a democracy. Followers expect leaders to be wealthy, and so when a leader is not wealthy, it looks like that leader is a failure. And of course, wealthy leaders or those who are wealthy will go around throwing money about, throwing parties, buying drinks, and so on for the followers. Not knowing, the followers not knowing that these resources that are thrown around are resources that should have been used, in the development process of the state. And so people who earn an honest living, who are not very wealthy, cannot aspire to be leaders, because of the environment in which we live. So many followers also have gotten involved in certain dirty jobs or belittling jobs, fake businesses, prostitution. You have certain people certain people who are 419ers, just because they cannot earn a decent living. There are no jobs, there are no resources. The environment is not conducive to grow a business, and so they get involved in these other activities that are not very, very legitimate. All right, this is an assessment, just a brief assessment of leadership or followership in Nigeria. Of course, we can add to the list. Tony Falola has summarized his reflection on the contemporary Nigerian society. So this is how Tony Falola perceives Nigeria currently, the contemporary Nigerian society. And of course, even though these reflections were made in 1990, as far back as 1990, we can argue whether or not in 2000, they still are relevant in describing contemporary Nigerian society. So he has said that leadership, that is widely acceptable has not yet emerged. All right, Nigerian people have not yet widely accepted the leadership that is in power. And so the question is this a reflection of Nigeria today, or is it not? All right. The second point he has made is that the political structure that should give rise to a good leadership is yet to emerge. So the political structure is not one that encourages good leadership, and of course we have continued to talk about restructuring of the Nigerian federal system, which is still an ongoing debate or argument. Leadership that is patriotic enough to withstand and combat the manipulation of external forces has not yet emerged. So his argument is that Nigerian leadership is still very, very susceptible to external influence or influence from external forces. And the question is that a reflection of Nigeria today or not? All right. So these are some of the reflections of Falola about the contemporary Nigerian society. And in very many cases, or in very many instances, most of the things that have been listed here are things that still apply to Nigeria today to a very large extent. So regardless of the fact that these reflections were made in 1990, over three decades ago, they are still very relevant in describing Nigeria. And so that begs the question: what is the level of progress or development in the Nigerian state? Leadership that is able to provide solution to the problem of instability is still yet to emerge. So leadership in Nigeria has not yet been able to provide a solution to the political instability, and unrest and underdevelopment that is experienced in Nigeria. Leadership has continued to prevent successful transfer of power. Election has remained a major challenge in Nigeria since independence. Of course, elections now are becoming freer and fairer, but there's still a whole lot, to be done to improve electoral system in Nigeria. Followership has been timid, compromising, and susceptible to the scheme, of the leaders. So, of course, in recent past, especially with the SARS protests, the end SARS protests, we see a leadership that is becoming bolder, that is becoming emboldened, and that is standing up, to the government and asking for what is rightfully theirs. But in the past, leadership has been more or less timid, has been very timid, has been very compromising with the leadership, and of course, if followership can maintain this momentum that is beginning now, then of course we might have a followership that holds the leaders accountable, that demands transparency from the leadership. So these are some of the reflections of Falola about contemporary Nigerian society. And of course, the question, or you can agree or disagree, depending on on which of the reflections you are looking at. You can agree or disagree to a very large extent. But the point is that to a very large extent, these reflections are still very true of the Nigeria of 2020. All right. Now, what do we do to achieve the leadership or followership that we desire, the kind of leadership and followership we desire? It has been suggested that there has to be a total overhaul and a reorientation of of followers as well as leaders. So from bottom up, we have to reorient ourselves. We have to overhaul and our philosophies, our perspectives about politics, about society, about governance. We need to do that in order for us to identify what are the important things and pursue those things that are important. Citizenship and leadership training institutions, it must be alive to the responsibilities. The family, the church, the school. The church has been one aspect of society that has not contributed meaningfully to the governance process. So many churches shy away from contributing significantly to the process of governance. Of course, even though there should be a separation from the church and the state, but the church is an agent of socialization, and of course must contribute. At least must help to sensitize and train the people on the right kind of attitude, the right kind of behavior that will be beneficial for the society at large. All right. Progressive, selfless leaders should be celebrated. So leaders who have been who are distinguished, who have achieved certain phenomenal wins or gains should be celebrated. And that could also help to encourage other leaders to toe the same line. Honest, virtuous, patriotic deeds, by both leaders and citizens should be also awarded or recognized and celebrated. All right. It should not only be in sports or some other athletic exercises or endeavors. People who perform certain acts that are patriotic should be recognized, should be rewarded, as that will serve as an example for others to emulate and follow. Recipients of national awards, we have so many awards, GCFR, MON, and so on and so forth. All these awards, recipients of these awards who down the line prove to be undeserving of these awards, should be stripped of the awards, so that will also serve as deterrence to others, who have gotten these awards and who are not representing the awards that they have gotten. So these are some of the suggestions, of immediate things that can be done in moving towards the kind of leadership and followership that we desire in the Nigerian state. All right. Now here is a table that shows a list in chronological order of leaders in Nigeria, the periods that they have ruled, and the type of regime that they ruled under as well. It's important for us to have and understand, know this table, commit as much of it to memory as possible, so that as students of government, we can easily say, this is the period within which Tafawa Balewa was president or was leader in Nigeria, was prime minister. This is the period within which Shehu Shagari was president. This is the period within which General Muritala Mohammed was in charge. This is the period within which Abacha was in charge. And these are the kinds of regime that they had. All right. The list, of course, is not exhaustive because Goodluck Ebele Jonathan's regime or his leadership ended in 2015. And so from May 29, 2015, President Muhammad Buhari has been in charge up to date. So you may need to update that list. But the point is, this information is relevant, for us as students of government to have, so that we are able to know these leaders, to know the periods that they ruled, and of course, what kind of regime they had. All right. The regime type of Ernest Shonekan in 1993 was unelected civilian regime, and that was because that regime was not elected, but rather it was an appointed regime. Ernest Shonekan was appointed by Ibrahim Babangida to head an interim government. They had an objective. The government had an objective, which of course was not achieved because after 3 months of being appointed rather, the regime was cut short. So these are very important things that I think we should know as students of government. In conclusion, we have said that leadership and followership are reinforcing concepts. So leaders do not exist without followers. Followers do not exist without leaders. And of course, we have talked about the various assessments of leadership, followership in Nigeria over the years by various people. Leadership, self-serving, self-interested. followership, largely timid, even though waking up now, but largely timid, largely opportunistic. So many people are still, just trying to get their own share of national cake, which of course has not contributed, has not made very significant contributions, to helping us achieve the kind of leadership or followership that we desire in Nigeria. All right. We have talked about the steps that we must take in order to come out of this kind of leadership and followership and aspire towards the kind of leadership and followership that we desire. All right, a total overhaul, a reorientation of both leaders and followers, recognition of people who are patriotic leaders who are outstanding, withdrawing of honors given to people who are undeserving, who have proven themselves to be undeserving over time, okay, and so on and so forth. So these are some of the efforts, things that we can do, in order to move in the direction that we desire and achieve a kind of leadership that would serve the interests of all the followers and even the leaders in the Nigerian state and help us to build a prosperous, progressive Nigerian society. This is where we're going to end the presentation today. I hope that this has been helpful. If there are questions or comments, certainly we can take the conversation further. But in the meantime, thank you so much for listening.